Jaden, we're about to get started. Let's get going.
You want a chop?
Want a chip, bro? As in a chop? Yeah, chip. A potato chop.
Today we're going to take you through what you need to know as a New Zealand citizen to buy property in Australia.
We're going to go through all the tips if you're looking at buying a property from New Zealand in Australia, or if you just moved over to Australia and you're from New Zealand, and what the restrictions are. Can you get the First Home Buyer's grant? We're going to go through all that in a step-by-step video.
So Jaden, as a New Zealand citizen, I guess my first question is, can I buy a property in Australia?
Yes, but it depends on a few things. So if you're currently living in New Zealand and you want to buy a property in Australia, it is possible, but there are some restrictions. So you're going to need at least about a 20 to 25% deposit to be able to do that. If you've moved over from New Zealand and you're living and working in Australia, your normal lending criteria applies. So you can potentially get a loan up to 95%. And thirdly, if you're living elsewhere, so if you're a New Zealand citizen and you're working overseas and you want to buy a property in Australia, it's pretty difficult. The banks would consider that non-resident lending and it's pretty tough. But I guess overall, the biggest criteria is the property has to be in Australia. Unfortunately, Australian banks can't lend on properties in New Zealand. So if you've got existing property back home and you want to leverage equity and pull stuff out from that, you're going to have to talk to a mortgage broker back in New Zealand. All right, Nader, so if I'm a Kiwi that's moved over to Australia, am I going to get penalized and have to pay a much higher interest rate?
Short answer is no. So interest rates are exactly the same whether you're living in New Zealand and buying in Australia, or if you're a New Zealand citizen living and buying in Australia, your interest rates will be no different to the open market, which is a good thing. If you're a New Zealand citizen and you found the property you're interested in, do you still need approval from the government to buy the property from FIRB?
No, so you don't need approval from the Foreign Investment Review Board, which in Australia is required for non-residents buying property here. So that's good news. So essentially, if you're a New Zealand citizen, you're buying property in Australia, everything works the same as if you're an Australian citizen buying property in Australia, which is awesome. All right, Nados, but what about stamp duty? So this is something that doesn't exist in New Zealand, you lucky guys, but it does exist in Australia. So I guess what is stamp duty? And if I'm a New Zealand citizen, do I have to pay it?
Yeah, stamp duty is a tax that goes straight to the state government. The good news is, as first homeowners purchasing for the first time in Australia, you will be likely eligible for a stamp duty waiver. Now with stamp duty, it does look at if you own property back home in New Zealand or anywhere else in the world for that matter. So if you do own property or have owned property previously, that may be that you won't be eligible. For the stamp duty concession or stamp duty waiver, there are certain purchase amounts that would need to be adhered to. So in Queensland, that is a 500,000 purchase. If you buy for 500,000 or less, you'll pay no stamp duty, and from 500 to 550, you get a discount. So as a New Zealand citizen, will you get the First Home Buyer's grant? Jaden?
Next minute.
Yes. Yeah, so New Zealand citizens are considered permanent residents in Australia. So you'll be eligible for the First Home Buyer's grant, which in Queensland is 15 grand. So you get that to purchase a brand new property that's been recently completed. Different in different states, so check it out. But the good thing is, tick, as a New Zealand citizen, if you've not owned property before and you're looking at buying it in Australia, you will qualify for the First Home Buyer's grant. All right, Nathan, so what if I own a property back in New Zealand and I'm looking at leveraging equity from that? What do you actually do?
You definitely can access the equity back home in your property in New Zealand. Now remember what Jaden said earlier, lending with an Australian bank on a New Zealand property is unacceptable, so you'd need to talk to your bank back home to release the equity, which then can be used as a deposit in Australia for your purchase.
Yeah, so interestingly, even though we've got similar banks, Westpac's in New Zealand, ANZ's in both Australia and New Zealand, and even the Commonwealth Bank own ASB back in New Zealand, their systems are completely different. So they don't talk. So you're gonna have to literally apply for a loan back in New Zealand, and then you have to apply for the loan here in Australia to be able to leverage the equity from back there to buy something over here. So it's a bit weird, but it is possible. All right, Nader, so lastly, what documents do I need to apply if I'm an NZ citizen looking at buying in Australia?
As a New Zealand citizen, buying in Australia, your documentation is going to be normal as per the regular process. Pay slips and bank statements, if you're self-employed, tax returns, is all the sort of normal information that the banks look at and would assess your application before approving it.
The good news is there's no minimum term for having to live in Australia. So you just need to move over here, get a job over here, and potentially you can apply for a home loan once you've got a payslip. It's quite straightforward. If you want more information though, hit us up at Hunter Galloway. And if you like this video, make sure you leave a thumbs up or subscribe. Until next time guys, see ya.
Thanks for watching.